joined now for our latest Clare History in Focus chat by the one, the only local historian and author, Colm Liddy. Colm, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks very much for being with us. This one, I was telling you off air, I'm very interested in history, a bit of a history buff, but this one, I'd passed me by. I was not aware of it. The Terry Alt Rebellion. So really looking forward to hearing about this. Where do you want to begin with this? The Terry Alt Rebellion. Sounds like a band name.
Yeah. Okay, so it could be my favourite thing actually in Clare history. It's this little time for about 6 months in 1831 where we had our own private rebellion on in this county, which turned the place into a war zone and certainly gave the authorities plenty to think about. The conditions were, one, naturally, the peasantry were starving. The potatoes had kind of failed the previous winter, and therefore the price of potatoes quadrupled, which is very bad news for the many people who were surviving on nothing but. But the second thing is kind of intriguing is, to some extent, it relates to Daniel O'Connell's election just a few years previously. Because what that had done is, it had raised hope. Hope, a very dangerous commodity.
And God knows we had very little of that for centuries.
Indeed. So it had, I suppose, led some to believe that when we would get this guy into Parliament, that magically all our problems would be over. But of course, he was just one guy in a massive Parliament. In fact, you could say it would take 50 years of gradually building before we had any significant parliamentary force in the House of Commons. So, yeah, people kind of thought we'd get him over the line and then all would be well. But it wasn't. And that is the conditions for... It's not when things are at their very worst that people rebel. It's when they're pretty bad and when your hopes are dashed. That's when people really get angry.
Okay, and maybe we're seeing a bit of that in Iran at the moment, but we'll stick with Clare. So how their hopes are dashed, things seem to be pretty bad. How did it all begin? Was it a slow process or did it just spark?
Yeah, well, first of all, I suppose what we're talking about is what is known generally in Ireland as white boy activity. But here we have our own special name. And how it came about was in Corofin, at one stage early on, there had been a bit of an attack. And when the constables arrived to investigate and the crowd gathered around in glee to see what was going on, and they turned around and said, "Who did this?" And some wag at the back said, "It was Terry Alt." And why that was a joke locally, because what they meant was Terry Alt was the name of a Protestant man, the most peaceful, meek little fellow in the town. Plainly couldn't be him. So the joke was to say it was Terry Alt.
We're not telling you.
Yeah. But then it caught fire. The joke actually became a joke all over Clare. So from then on, if anything bad happened, they would say, "Oh, it must have been Terry Alt." Because he was a real live person. He was plagued ever after that his name had become associated with this
I was going to ask you that. How did this? I'm reminded of, if my children do something, they blame their imaginary friend for doing it. But this is a real life individual. He must have been a bit put out by...
He was. It kind of ruined his life. He actually wrote letters, to the authorities, "Please take me out of this hellhole of a county." Because, his name was associated. And for decades afterwards, any kind of criminal activity at night by, vigilantes is known as the Terry Alts, or the Terrys for short. But, what it actually manifests, the classic form of it is a bunch of guys assemble in the dark to do a vigilante thing. They wear often straw masks. They're very uncanny. It's a dark world before there's light, before there's electric light. So they're wandering around in the dark. They're in these masks, or they're wearing women's clothing. That's, for some reason, is often a feature of it. It's uncanny when men wear dresses. And then finally, of course, they sometimes just blacken their faces with soot. So they go about and they threaten you. That's how it normally works. So specifically, the people who are selling the potatoes at astronomical prices, they arrive at your door, pull you out of the bed and talk to you. If all is well, they talk to you. Or they might send notes. Somebody in the area might be literate enough to write a note, and they will threaten you and often write a coffin. Is a little drawing of a coffin. They can sometimes build a gallows outside your door, or then, of course, they might move past the non-verbal to actually sort of threatening you by physically bringing you out and giving you a little bit of a beating. You know, shall we say.
A little bit of a beating.
bit of a beating.
I like thrashing.
But I will say, so today we're actually going to deal with Terry's over 2 episodes, and a lot of it did ultimately wind up in violence, but we'll leave that for the second episode. Today I want to talk about what I think is their coolest thing, is their main form of protest, which is digging up fields. Because as well as the price of potatoes, the other massive issue is at this moment in agriculture, Irish farmers have realised it's a lot handier to make money out of cattle. But the thing is that a field of 100 acres of corn requires at least 30 labourers to sow it, weed it, harvest it and all that, constantly, you know, attending it. Whereas a field of cattle, all you need is one herdsman and maybe a boy to help him. That's it. So it's a massive problem in terms of creating unemployment. And also everybody in Ireland at this point in the countryside needs 1 acre of ground to grow their potatoes. That's what keeps the whole show on the road. And now increasingly there will be no more 1 acres. So they need ground to be dug up. So incredibly, they assemble maybe at least initially a few dozen, then 100, then 1,000 of them in the darkness at some farmer who has moved over to cattle. And they just dig up massive areas of ground with their shovels. They arrive with their shovels, dig up the whole area, knock the walls so any cattle will just wander off out into the road. And you're left with ground that is no longer suitable for cattle. It's almost like you have to sow crops now because they've done that first bit of tilling the soil. So it's a back-breaking form of protest, and it just shows how desperate they were.
My God, they really were. And I'm just thinking of how devastating that would be to someone if you're on the receiving end of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, sure. I mean, the toffs who owned a lot of this land were not impressed. And like there's examples over and over throughout this period of 1831 in the Clare newspapers. A big one was there was a bunch of people down near O'Brien's Bridge in the bog. It's called Portnacrusha Bog, digging a huge, bunch of tenants and peasantry when the Terrys arrived and said, come on lads, and they went to a local landowner and dug up, huge acreage. It happened also in Scariff at Tubernagot, where they counted 1,000 people all together. Men, women and children, because whereas it started in the darkness, by and by they became more bold, and women and children, everybody was marching to a certain spot and digging up areas of like 10, 20, 30 acres, And
I suppose when you're talking about numbers of that size up to 1,000, you can feel emboldened to do it in brighter periods of the day the day, because who's going to challenge a group
exactly.
that big?
The constables often witnessed them, but they felt they could do nothing. And eventually they did. They went to a place in Feakle where, again, it was happening. And the constables thought a few warning shots would help to disperse. It didn't. It made them angry. They chased the constabulary down to their barracks and surrounded them. Eventually the priest arrived to let the constables out, to prevent, please let me let them out. And when they were gone, the mob destroyed the Feakle barracks. They literally just levelled it. There was nothing left. Their anger, they just, with shovels and picks, and this was a stone building, was basically flattened by the angry mob.
Oh God, the sheer force. Okay. Where do you want to go? What do you want to tell us next?
Well, okay, their most audacious act of defiance went like this. The Lord Lieutenant, also known as the Viceroy of Ireland, realised that Clare had turned into an absolute war zone, and he was very annoyed at the local gentry who weren't showing a bit of
impudent locals
who were failing to control the peasantry indeed. So he called a meeting at a place we all probably know, Carragoran. It's now a nursing home. At that time it was the residence of an Augustine Fitzgerald, a major landowner in the area just outside New Arkle and Fergus. So with no notice, Lord Lieutenant says, I'm going to go down there and you will put me up and I'll speak to the entire gentry. Panic for poor Augustine, because while the peasantry were getting so angry, he had sent all his good cutlery and platter up to Dublin, all his silverware, to be minded, away from where it could be stolen.
Yeah. And
now suddenly the Lord Lieutenant is coming down, so he's no notice. So he has to beg, steal and borrow cutlery from all the other members of the gentry around him. Anyway, he manages to assemble a dinner, you'll be glad to know. So the Lord Lieutenant comes down, gathers the gentry, says, come on, lads, come on. And, let's put a stop to this, show a bit of leadership. And then they all, of course, have a massive banquet while the peasantry are kind of starving outside. Then they all go to bed at night. Some of them go home. A lot of them stay over because there's going to be another meeting in the morning. But when they woke up in their lavish rooms and opened the curtains, drew back the curtains, looked outside.
I can't wait to hear this.
A massive area all around Cairngorm had been dug up silently in the middle of the night. As far as the eye could see, you just see bare earth where once there had been lovely lawns. And it had happened in silence.
Can you imagine? I'm trying to picture their faces.
Yeah. Oh, he went off in a huff anyway. He had thought that it was going to be so simple to sort this out and a bit of leadership, but he had been, dissuaded otherwise. And so we did what we normally do in these situations and just realised that a military solution generally works very well.
That's it. Yeah, put them down. So how did, and all you Star Wars fans out there, how did the Empire strike back?
The Empire struck back. They naturally sent down large detachments of the British military who went around the county rounding up anybody who looked somewhat like a bit of a rebel, and they were brought in, hundreds were brought in obviously to the jails in Ennis and around the place, and eventually a large show trial was set for, I think it's June or July that year. And now in fairness, there was a wide range of crimes that definitely had been committed: murder, robbery, forcing people to swear oaths, and of course the digging up grounds, and things like assaulting a household, which just means going into a household, So they were all rounded up, and really how it works is it's the information from informers. That's it. There is no, of course, forensics. There's nothing really except what informers say. You have an alibi? Well, so what? Our informer says you were there. And you did it.
And we know who they believe more.
Yeah, they have the Attorney General has come along. His name is Francis Blackburn. He's there in person. Now, in fairness, some of the Terrys are, or at least those alleged to be Terrys, are defended by Daniel O'Connell himself, who, as you know, as a lawyer. But it's to no avail. It matters not. The state has decided that examples are going to be made. So those who were found guilty of murder were hung, of course, summarily, and everyone else, no matter how trivial we might think the crime, digging up somebody's lawn, how much of it did you actually do? Well, anyway, you were sentenced to death for that also.
Sentenced to death for digging? I know there were big holes, but...
But I will say now, in fairness, in those cases, the sentence to death was just to put the frighteners on you, because then they showed mercy. And mercy was transportation for life to Australia.
Better climate.
So, and I mean, the thing about it is that the transportation at that time, nobody in Ireland, or certainly in the likes of Clare, had gotten used to the idea of emigration yet. That was to come in later times. So they were frightened. They thought transportation to Australia was death as far as they were concerned, because both for them, the terrible loss of the community they'd lived in, and for those who left behind, there was appalling scenes, because when they would be sentenced, there was no appeal. It was instant. You left the jail.
You carted off straight away.
The cart was outside waiting, and there was appalling shrieking and screaming of, naturally, the wives and children of many of these men, who were decamped immediately to a ship down in Cork and then off to Australia.
Because, I mean, look, even, a trip to Australia now is a massive deal, but we have big ships and airplanes. And back then, you go there, you're not coming back.
No, and indeed, like those families, there isn't really no way of staying in touch. I mean, that's it. Like, you'll never see them again, is the reality. I suppose a few cases might have occurred where a second person was transported and later on, reunited.
Yeah, just whisper as you're being carted off, here, commit a crime quickly.
But even I remember reading a case a few years later where some women committed crimes attempting to get to the same place. And out of pure spite, they sent them somewhere else.
I shouldn't be laughing.
I know. Well, that's just how they roll, you know what I mean? Or, you might, if one is in Australia, Sydney, and the other is sent to Tasmania or Van Diemen's Land, well, I mean, effectively, they're 1,000 miles apart anyway, and there's no way of finding a person once you're put us under. So yes, it was an appalling thing, and in fairness, like so much of these actions, was brutally effective, you have to say. They had tried being nice to us, it hadn't worked as they see it. And so yes, it was very effective. Not only did the Terry-Alt rebellion end then, but all crime in Clare for several years afterwards was the lowest national average, around the country. Clare had the least crime for quite a while afterwards.
Yeah, but what you've just told us, it is no surprise. But as you said, this is part 1, so there's a part 2. So clearly a lot more to come, Colm.
Yeah, we'll go into a bit more of the violent element of it. Because, as I say, whereas most participants were satisfied with the non-violent version of protest. But yeah, it was quite a war zone. There was many murders during the time, and, down along the line, all sorts of assaults. And I mean, I suppose you'd have to say about the whole thing, although it was eventually sorted out, as I say, by the military and by these rigged trials, it was a time bomb. I mean, what it had demonstrated was how quickly a starving populace could become unruly, but nothing was done. 14 years later, things would happen like in Clare, but on a national scale,
I have to say, I cannot wait to hear more, and particularly on poor old Terry-Alt. My heart goes out to him.
Yeah. No, I think he eventually left Corofin, because, as I say, he was the joke of the town, and I'm not sure what ultimately became of him. He had spent some time in the British Army, and had, as I say, been a peaceful, meek man until he found notoriety.
I can only hope for his sake that word of the Terry-Alt phenomenon had not travelled far and wide, and he became the Terry-Alt, in inverted commas, of another community, because that'd just be out of the frying pan and into the fire. But absolutely fascinating stuff as ever. Colm, thank you for joining us for our latest Clare History in Focus chat. If people want to find out more about you, you're tipping away at that book.
I am, yeah. The history of Clare, we'll get there bit by bit, 15 minutes at a time.
15 minutes at a time. This is going to be quite the tome. And if people want to check out your shop?
It's on the shopinireland.ie website, yeah.
Okay, brilliant stuff. Colm Liddy, as ever, thank you very much for being with us.